So the UN Security Council voted on a ceasefire resolution. Now, this is not an actual ceasefire because the Americans immediately refused to even recognize the validity of it, and there was so much back and forth. You know, this has been happening for months, where the Americans, they want to put in the language that Hamas is bad, or Hamas should be condemned, and Hamas has to be destroyed, and you know, they want some kind of language like that, and they refuse to put in language that says there should be a ceasefire. And I want to explain to you how deranged this is, because in the past, it was easy to get a resolution passed that said, yes, there should be a ceasefire. What's so controversial about that? But now they don't even use this word in simple, parlay. They just don't mention the word ceasefire. They came up with something new called a humanitarian pause. That's specific to this conflict. Before, maybe some fringe uses of the term were out there, but you would never hear humanitarian pause said by a foreign minister or something. I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm telling you, this is my job. You don't hear that often. Now it's replaced the word ceasefire entirely, and it doesn't have the same meaning. It has no meaning whatsoever. So it's taken months for this to get passed. And what happened in the UN yesterday, I mean, it was a joke, because the Americans, they put forward a resolution, and they had the word ceasefire from it completely removed. And then the Russians and the Chinese, they vetoed it. And of course, as usual, the Americans say, oh my God, why did you veto the resolution? I thought you care about peace in Gaza. Yeah, well, it's because there's no mention of ceasefire in there. What they don't tell you also is that just before that, the Russians, not just in the last session, but for months, have been trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. Ceasefire. Let's get the word ceasefire in the resolution. And every time the Americans veto it, I've lost count of how many times they've vetoed this. And this is why I always tell you that the Israelis have 3 UN Security Council seats, right? They have the United States, UK, and France, who do their bidding for them. This is why you understand now why, of course, the Israeli lobby, the AIPAC lobby, is so fervent and adamant on maintaining control over US politicians, because they need basically a foot in the door at the UN in New York, and of course the other organs of the Secretariat and the UN itself, to make sure that no one can actually do anything that doesn't suit them, or otherwise. And of course, peace doesn't suit the Israelis. Let me show you the passing of the vote itself.
Draft resolution contained in document
Sorry, the passing of the resolution, forgive me.
Resolution contained in document S/2024/254. Please raise their hand. Those against? Abstention. The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 0 vote against, 1 abstention. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2728, 2024.
No one usually claps in the UN Security Council, so you get an idea of the atmosphere and the feeling of partial relief in the room. I'll show you this excellent tweet here. He said that last time this happened was when de Villepin gave a historic speech against the Iraq War in 2003. Yes, absolutely. And let me say something. The United States, they abstained, okay? This is the first time they've actually done this. Usually it was always veto. And to have 14, in favor of this, and the U.S. finally just letting it through the door. Yes, it is a remarkable breakthrough, but is it going to achieve anything? Sadly, no. Sadly, no. And I say this ironically wearing this. You know, the problem is that UN Security Council resolutions are legally binding, but apparently Mr. Kirby thinks otherwise.
Don, what was the president's reaction to the decision by Netanyahu not to send an Israeli delegation this week?
I gotta tell you, Steve,
So he's asking him, what do you think of the decision by the Israelis not to send this delegation to the U.S.? That was Netanyahu's way of expressing his displeasure and dissatisfaction at the United States allowing the resolution to pass.
we're kind of perplexed by this. A couple of points that need to be stated and, in fact, restated. Number one, it's a non-binding resolution, so there's no impact at all on.
That's a lie. This is a disgusting lie. It's not something up for debate. A UN Security Council resolution is a legally binding document. It's like, it's no different from the Parliament or the Senate passing a law. It's legally binding. Whether you like it or you don't like it, you have to apply it. Period. No discussion. Otherwise, leave the UN. What are you in the UN for? The Israelis, the only reason the Israelis are in the UN is because they want to claim legitimacy through statehood, and they wanted to use the partition plan, which of course they don't even apply because it means two states, not one state and no Palestine. You understand? It's a legally binding document. You have to implement it. You have to. No choice. And for the United States to say this not only as a UN member state, but as a founding member on the Security Council, I mean, this is shocking to me. I don't even know how he can utter such a thing. I don't care that he's just the spokesperson. He's the goddamn White House spokesperson. This is Biden's mouth. He's either, I'm sorry. This is one of those things where it doesn't even require explanation because of how absurd it is.
On Israel and Israel's ability to continue to go after Hamas. Number two, as I said in my opening statement, it does not represent a change at all in our policy. It's very consistent with everything that we've been saying we want to get done here. And we get to decide what our policy is. The Prime Minister's office seems to be indicating through public statements that we somehow changed here.
Now, I agree with him on this point. Yes, there will be no change on the part of the United States. We know that. And it's funny watching this drama between Israel and the U.S. I mean, there's no drama. It's just an act. It's just, it's just how diplomacy, if you can call it that, works, right? The canceling of this trip that I'm referring to. My point here is just that there is so little room for any flexibility or divergence that even the United States abstaining for a ceasefire resolution causes displeasure among the Israelis to the point that they have to, retaliate in some sort of slight diplomatic act. It's funny. It shows you how much control the Israelis have over the Americans, and how pathetic it is that the United States allows itself to be, offended by something like that. I mean, really, it's incredible. And even more incredible than that, as I mentioned, to spit on and, basically say the UN and the UN Security Council resolutions that are legally binding are discarded as irrelevant things is really tragic. I mean, it's because of this behavior that nothing is ever done. The UN does good things, but then they're sabotaged by the Israelis and by the Americans. Keep in mind, this is nothing, this resolution. It's not the first time the Israelis refuse to abide by one. I mean, 242 from the 1967 war, which told the Israelis you have to get out of the West Bank, Jerusalem, the Golan Heights in Syria. Have they abided by that? No. How many years have passed since 1967? Then, of course, you have the other resolutions when the Israelis annexed these exact territories. They didn't abide by that either. And it's just, it stacks up. And keep in mind, those resolutions I just mentioned were accepted or abstained by the United States. So even back then, the United States agreed with these things and allowed them to pass. And the Israelis continue to this day to spit on those resolutions. And then they complain, why are there so many resolutions against us? Well, because you keep breaking the law. That's why. This is just what I wanted to show you, and I wanted to show you also the reaction from various actors and around the world. So Hamas, let's look at Hamas and their reaction. I mean, at the same time as this resolution was being passed in New York, you had negotiations between Hamas and the Israelis. Hamas were very clear. They said, we want a ceasefire, but in addition to that, we want to have a hostage exchange. They said this on October 7th, since day one. Why would you capture hostages otherwise if you don't want to exchange them, right? I mean, obviously, that's the point and the objective, and it's been the same deal since day one. Ceasefire, hostage swap, allowing Gazans to return home, Gazans who've been displaced, 1.5 million Gazans who've been displaced, and then, of course, Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. So it's the same deal that's been on the table since day one. And the Israelis, what did they do? They refused this deal by Hamas. How could you refuse the deal? You get back all the Israeli hostages. You leave Gaza. The war ends. No. So that shows you who wants peace and who doesn't. And keep in mind the prisoner swap. Look, it came to this point that there have to be hostage exchanges because the Israelis keep throwing people in jail and they keep using military courts to throw civilians in prison. Keep in mind, the people that Hamas are trying to free are not even in Gaza. They're from Jerusalem, the West Bank, so they're in areas they don't even administer, which shows you that this is really about Palestinians. It's not about getting Hamas, something special, or they just care about the national cause, nothing else. They care about human rights. They don't want children to be thrown in prison, for people to be thrown in prison without charge or trial. I mean, Jesus Christ, this is the most barbaric thing that you can do, and Israelis do it every day to people. You go to prison and it's classified. You don't even know why you're in prison. Have you ever heard of such a thing? I mean, even Assange knows what he's being charged with. The Israelis don't even tell you. No, it's classified. Hamas welcomed the UN Security Council resolution while saying they were ready to negotiate the release of captives in exchange for Palestinian detainees. Okay? We know what the Israelis did, of course, and I'll show you down here with the Saudis and the French and so on. And I want you to pay attention to these countries, Egypt and so on. Look, so they say that typically the Egyptians say that the resolution represents the first important and necessary step to stop the bloodshed. Okay, what are you doing to allow the trucks in? Or are you going to keep the Israelis having them backed up and backlogged and starving Gazans? No mention. Saudi Arabia. The international community must stop the Israeli aggression. Okay, so all these countries, they talk about the bloodshed, the aggression, but they're participating in the slaughter, right? Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, all of them. They're taking part in the slaughter, and they give out these empty garbage statements. But make no mistake, so do the European states like France. Sustained truce between Israel. What does that mean, a sustained truce? Dude, what about the Palestinians in prison, the hostages? What about freeing them? What about a Palestinian state, which you all promised, which you all agreed to and signed? No mention, right? So they'll go on and they'll get a resolution passed for permanent ceasefire, one day, and then they still won't do anything. So nothing is changing. Like this is just it's like trying to move mountains to get a stupid piece of paper passed, and then even after that, no one bothers to apply it. So the problem here is that there's no enforcement mechanism. There is no incentive, good or bad, to make countries actually follow the Security Council resolutions, which they agreed to follow when they joined the United Nations as member states. There's nothing. This is what the Russian ambassador said. He said the word lasting, right, of a lasting ceasefire could be interpreted in various different ways. And that is very telling. Those who are providing cover for Israel still want to give it a free hand. Exactly. And this is how we come to a situation like this where, the Americans, they use ambiguous legal language, whether they're negotiating an extradition treaty or they're negotiating a Security Council resolution, and they do it on purpose because they just want to get it passed as an act so that afterwards they don't have to act on it, pun intended. And so, this is like with the UN resolution 242, that Security Council resolution said Israel has to withdraw from the recently occupied territories. What does occupied territories mean? Someone is in the bathroom, or are we talking about the West Bank? Yeah, obviously it's clear what it means to everybody else and everyone who is honest and straightforward. But the Americans and the Israelis then start playing games. Well, occupy. I don't know. Is it occupied if we annexed it? Because now it belongs to us, like illegally. Let me show you another clip. This is Matt Lee with the State Department spokesperson.
Referred to the
okay,
UN
but the abstention means that
for
you're okay with it. You're willing to go along with it, and so what do you expect now to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think
do you expect that Israel is going to announce a ceasefire?
I do not.
Do you expect that Hamas is going to release hostages?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we have objected to for some time is that most of the people that call for a ceasefire, we believe, are calling for Israel to unilaterally stop operations and not calling for Hamas to agree to a ceasefire where they would release hostages.
Well, I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It could, but but the resolution today is a non-binding resolution. But
again, what is this? How can these people lie like this? What do you mean it's non-binding? A non-binding resolution is when the General Assembly, every single UN member state together vote on something. That's non-binding. A Security Council resolution is fucking binding. That's the whole point of the goddamn organ. I can't believe these people. This is literally like saying 1 + 1 = 15. What the fuck are you saying?
Do you expect that Hamas is going to release hostages?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we have objected to for some time is that most of the people that call for a ceasefire, we believe, are calling for Israel to unilaterally stop operations and not calling for Hamas to agree to a ceasefire where they would release hostages.
Well, I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It could, but but the resolution today is a non-binding resolution. But
okay, so what's the point?
Well,
why did you abstain? Why didn't you veto?
We didn't veto because we thought the language in it was consistent with something that. The language as it relates to the ceasefire and release of hostage was consistent with.
I don't think that was good of Matt Lee to just go along with, No, you're supposed to interrupt him and say it's binding. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe he just wanted to kind of let him fall down his own rabbit hole.
With something that. The language as it relates to the ceasefire and release of hostage was consistent with the long-standing United States position.
So you don't believe anything is going to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think that separate and apart from this resolution, we have active, ongoing negotiations to try to achieve what this resolution calls for, which is an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages. I can't say that this resolution is going to have any impact on those negotiations. But those negotiations are ongoing. They've been ongoing over the weekend, and they've made progress.
So I don't expect you to answer this now, but to me, you just stick this in your pocket. If that's the case, what the hell is the point of the UN? of the UN Security Council.
So we think it plays an important role.
It does, even though its
range of
action does
security.
absolutely nothing.
A range of
and that you're going to get what you would like to see, not out of the UN, but out of discussions in Doha.
So we believe it's important that the UN speak and the UN Security Council speak on matters of international security. It's why we've been engaged in this process. It's why we thought we were going to have a successful vote on Friday that Russia and China unfortunately and quite cynically vetoed. But I do believe that ultimately, if we were
They vetoed it because it didn't say anything about a ceasefire. Was It's not like they vetoed it and it had ceasefire in there, but they vetoed it for some other reason, which shows they don't really care about a ceasefire. No. They literally vetoed it because of the same reason. They are consistent. They want a ceasefire. Russia and China want a ceasefire. If you remove the word ceasefire, veto. What is cynical about that? What is he talking about?
we're able to achieve a ceasefire and the release of hostages is going to come not through a UN process, but through the process with which we've been engaged, yes, in Doha.
Again, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. This is it's so wild listening to these people. I mean, I know that the spokespersons lie. Anyway, I'm used to that. It's my job to sit here, tell you how they're lying. Of course, I'm used to it, but this is really bad. I thought it was gonna go like, yes, we know they're binding, but we want to see some action first by Hamas, But no, now it's like they have gone balls to the wall, Just denying reality. It's not a thing. Next, they will say that the United States doesn't give weapons to Israel. Israel manufactures them. But is no role. Next, they will say Israel is not at war with Hamas. There's no war. Next, they will say Hamas are allies of Israel. I mean, why don't you might as well say this? You're already this crazy, so just go ahead and say it. Why not? Maybe you could humor me a bit, literally. Humor me. Jesus. I mean, it's like, they're so crazy that they make you question your own sanity. Like you know that you're talking the truth, but they make you doubt yourself. I mean, this is really something else. So, the highlight of this passage is not that, as usual, Israel will just spit on the United Nations while using the United Nations to pretend it's a country. No. The highlight here is that the Americans are saying, these are two spokespersons, White House and the State Department, two different spokespersons of the top of the executive, telling you that the United Nations Security Council, which has been one of the primary 6 organs of the United Nations since its founding in 1945, it issues non-binding resolutions. It's a rag. You can put it in your pocket, as he said. This is the highlight. Oh, and by the way, people are dying in Gaza, of course. So, while they're joking around and pretending that, the law doesn't apply, just let's keep killing people, There you go.